What's going on, Packer fans? Welcome back to an all-new episode of the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. More importantly, my guest, you know him already, former Packers guard Mike Wahle. You can follow him on Twitter at Mike Wahle68. Mike, it has been a week since, just about a week since we talked last. There has not been a Packer game in between, but there's been it feels like forever ago. We've both had the opportunity to go through the tape a little bit more. But before we jump into that, how have you been and how are things going?
Life is good. Thanks for asking. Yeah, we're just hey, tell you what, we were just talking about it. We're just chugging along in Austin, Texas, and we're having some nice weather. We finally got some rain. You guys, it sounds like you guys are going the other way, but we finally got some rain. We're actually looking forward to it. We're looking forward to a little bit of non-106 degree temperatures down here. So we record this on Thursday. That means I got 5 days straight of football. Life is good.
Yeah, I saw something where earlier this week, I think it was Tuesday, there was no football Tuesday, but now there's football every single day, either college or NFL, until like November 22nd or something. So we're in a pretty good spot right now. I have a cold open question for you though, okay. that we didn't discuss prior. So last year, Indianapolis Colts don't play well. Mm-hmm. They fire their coach. They bring in Jeff Saturday. The Chicago Bears fire Matt Eberflus right now, and they call up Mike Wahle and they said, Mike, we've seen you on the Pack a Day podcast and everywhere else. We love what you're thinking. We want you to be the head coach of the Chicago Bears the remainder of this season. Are you taking the job? Yes or no?
The Chicago Bears called me.
Yep.
If the Chicago Bears called me, there's got to be something going on. I'm taking the job because I got to see what their plan is. Because you could call Olin Kreutz. He's in town. Call him.
Yeah.
But yeah, if they call me, I'm getting on the plane. I got to see what's going on. That would be an amazing. We would be doing a show every week. Your show would skyrocket to whatever you think you are now. We'd be in Hollis Hall doing it every day.
That would be amazing.
Just because they're the Bears.
Of course.
What an organization, by the way. Come on. They don't even have you start talking about Ryan Poles and when they were hired. They're doing when was he hired compared to when they hired Eberflus? Whose fault is this? Their roster is terrible.
Yep.
You could blame it on Eberflus isn't doing a good job. Whatever. Their roster is awful. There's nobody in their right mind could say that offensive and defensive line wise they have anything that resembles talent. You can't win with either one of those. If you're missing both sides of the ball in the trenches, what do you expect things aren't going to happen for you? We talked about it. You can pay your linebackers as much money as you want. If there ain't nobody in front of them, going to get run on.
It's crazy, and not necessarily a bad thing as a Packer fan, although they might get the first 2 picks in the draft, which might be a little bit different, but they have constantly been in a flux of they're either they get their GM and then the GM waits a year and then hires a coach and then they get a quarterback and then they let go of the GM and then they let go of the coach and then they let go of the quarterback and they're never on the same playing field. It's always different time periods. And it's Poles didn't get to choose his GM and it's always different, or his quarterback, excuse me. So this is their opportunity. I hope they don't do it. I hope they screw it up again. But this is their opportunity this offseason to just be we've got probably the first 2 picks in the draft. We are starting completely from scratch. We're getting a new GM, a new coach combined, like the 49ers did with Lynch and Shanahan. We're combining 2 people that are going to work cohesively with Caleb Williams and the second, probably Marvin Harrison Jr. And we're going to start with that and we're going to have them be together. But like I said, I'm fingers crossed they screw it up somehow.
There's so many, and it comes that what you just described just comes down to the ownership. That's the ownership problem more than anything else. And we've seen that over the years. I remember the New York Jets before this last hire when they brought Gase in, and I knew a lot of guys in that staff in that building because I'd been in Miami with those guys. And you just start hearing the way things operate in different buildings, and the built-in foundational dysfunction stemming from the top up or top down. If they're in your division, you're happy, right? But otherwise, it's good Lord. It's tough. We've talked about it before after that game. It's actually tough to watch because you go, this is the National Football League, guys. What are we doing?
Yeah, it really is. But enough about the Chicago Bears. Let's talk about our favorite topic, which is the Green Bay Packers, which didn't have the greatest outcome last week either, but lots to go through with that. we talked last Friday right after the game and kind of our gut reactions. But like I said, we've both had the opportunity to look at the tape a little bit more. I know the biggest question this week, and it's kind of been dissected in a lot of different ways, but I always am super respectful of your opinion from what you think of, especially in the trenches. Everyone wants to know right now what's going on the offensive line, and specifically not being able to run the ball and not being able to stop the run on the other side. What have you sort of saw, not only just this week, but maybe through the first quarter of the season, basically?
Well, you want to start on the offense. First of all, if you are as a play caller, as a leader, saying that you want to establish a run and you don't run the ball for the first 6 plays of the game, that's just that message isn't congruent with your actions, right? So I think that's part of it. So and every time, if you go back even the last 3-4 years, when you say you're not doing something well, it's usually because they're neglecting to actually do that thing. We could go back numerous instances over the last 3-4 years. So I think that's part of it. But if you're just looking at the offensive line, like, why is AJ Dillon not being successful? Why are the offensive linemen not holding it? I think that the offensive line is desperately missing David Bakhtiari from a leadership standpoint, from a ability standpoint, talent, all of that. I think Elgin Jenkins is if anything, he's the toughest guy on the line, if anything else. And so he brings that dimension to the team that I don't know that they necessarily have without him. And I don't think that they have technically, developmentally progressed in the last 2 years. I think 3 years ago, they had a good line. I think last year they were not as good. And I think this year they were worse. I don't think they're as physical. I don't think they're as confident in their foot. Like, if you just look at very simple things with linemen, footwork, body position, hand placement, they're not really, none of them are really good. Zach Tom's probably the only one you go, he's really good at all three of those. And talking about running pass game, like he gets a passing grade. I don't know that anybody else actually gets a passing grade for me and the rest of the offensive line through the first 4 games. That could change. So what does that mean? Well, Stanovich isn't in the offensive line room anymore. That has something to do with it. We talked about it before. I don't know how much. You don't know what these. I tweeted this out today, because a lot of people have questions about offensive line. Why isn't this working? We're not privy to how they actually practice.
Yeah.
We don't know the details that go into how Josh Myers actually practices. I could tell you that Mike Lanigan actually practiced like it was a game day. I could tell you that Marco treated meetings and preparation like it was game day. I could tell you that for a fact.
Yeah.
I can't say that about these guys. And when things aren't going well, that's kind of where I look, is like, are you preparing to be successful or are you not at the level that your competition is?
Yeah, unfortunately, from a practice standpoint, and it's almost useless. Like, basically, we get to take attendance and who's practicing and who's not. In training camp, we get to see everything. But once the season starts, it's literally just like stretch and then like the first 5 minutes of some individual drills that they're working on, and then we get kicked out. So unfortunately, we don't get to glean anything. I know somebody was asking me the other day with Elton in and Runyon out, who was with the first team right guard. We don't even see them line up in any sort of team sort of activities while we're there. So unfortunately, we don't get a great access to that either. And on the last practice before the game, all you get to see is just stretching, and then they kick you out right after that. So fortunately, not a ton that we can glean other than who's practicing, who's not, and if there's any new bodies or missing bodies that are, like I said, just basically taking attendance. But to your point, more importantly, yeah, I'm with you. We don't know exactly what's going into their practice habits. We can see that it has fallen off on the field in some capacity from a physicality and attention to detail standpoint. And yeah, I just think you need a better brand of football, specifically in the trenches. And if you're not, preaching it, kind of as you mentioned last week, if you're condoning it, if you're allowing it, you're basically condoning it. I just think they have to have a much greater attention to detail and physicality in the trenches. If not, we're going to see a lot more of this.
Yeah, and I work with a couple guys. One guy said something to me that really stuck with me, and he basically said, I said, offensive linemen, you get your paycheck for pass blocking, but you get your reputation for run blocking.
Yeah,
like you can be a really good pass blocker, always a good pass blocker, but if you're just a bad dude in run blocking, you finish blocks, and like people know who you are, and it might not be. It might not be the media. It might not be the fans. It probably is now because of social media and all the clips you can put out. Like back in the day, people, if you're walking in the airport and a player sees you, like they immediately give you respect because they know what kind of person you were on the field and that finishing, that attitude. And he said to me, this player who's playing right now, he said, it's not what it turns out to be is I think the first thing is, do we have confidence in what we're doing that we can execute at a high level? Otherwise, everyone's kind of hesitant. And then the second thing is, are we in shape enough that throughout the course of an entire game, we don't ever feel like we're like we've worked ourselves so hard in practice that we're never tired in a game when the other guys are falling off. That's when we can like step, maintain. It's like cold trickle. Like everybody was slowing down. I haven't sped up at all. You have that kind of feeling throughout the entire game. And I just don't know that a lot of guys practice that way. And I think the guys that do are the guys that show up consistently on Sundays, just kicking ass and taking names.
I hope they're not too tired since they've basically run like 50 plays a game through like the last 3 games. Like They're not even running like a full complement of plays, which is crazy to think about. But to your point of like finishing, like how many blocks have you seen Green Bay offensive linemen just flat out, maul someone, finish them, and get them to the ground like a true pancake? Like maybe a little bit over one hand I could count on so far, but we're talking fingers and toes like at most at this point. And yeah, there's just not many out there. And again, we can talk about whether that's the players that they draft, whether we can talk about development, we can talk about scheme, we can talk about all of it. But at some point you got to go out and kind of kick the other guy's ass. And we don't see unfortunately a ton of that from Green Bay.
I was watching, I think it was the Jaguars backup tight end, absolutely manhandling the defensive ends and defensive tackles. I'll remember his name in a second.
Well, the Vikings one you posted, Josh Oliver, it was the
Viking, Josh Oliver. This kid is absolutely wrecking people on the line of scrimmage. And we look back and we had Mercedes Lewis, and that made a huge impact as well. I mean, some of the people that aren't here anymore it does matter. But like kids like that, if you don't draft that kid, or you don't bring him in, and you just got a bunch of nice guys that run routes, it all, like every bit of it matters. Every bit that what you do. I think what happens now is I talked about this yesterday a little bit. If your players aren't doing well, like let's say you're not running the ball well, the coaches go into the office and they go, "Hey, Andy, we're not running the ball well. What should we do?" And they go, "Well, the plays we're running aren't working. So let's find some new plays." The Raiders doing this right now. They can't run their plays. So they got Josh Jacobs running jet sweeps to get 8-yard gains. Okay. And it's like, oh, that's great because you guys can draw anything up on the grease board. We've talked about that. But what if you made sure they were doing the plays that you wanted to run the right way? What if we spent practice really focusing on footwork, body position, and hand placement so we could do the plays that you want to run in context of your bigger picture game plan the way that you want to run them? And it's very, very quickly in the National Football League, the coaches just go, head coach comes in, "You guys can't run that play. We need some new plays." And it's like, no, man, we need to get the guys good at the stuff we're doing. And if they physically aren't able to do it, like you should have known that before the season started. You should have figured that out already. So I think offensively, I think a lot of it is just individually, you got to play better.
Yeah, I could not agree more. It's funny about Josh Oliver. I knew Green Bay wasn't going to go out and spend in free agency this year. They just didn't have the money. I put together a group of like 4 or 5, like maybe value free agents that they could go after. I think Josh Oliver was like number 1. He was very high on my list of players. Unfortunately, Minnesota did not view him as a value free agent. They signed him to a 3-year, $21 million deal. So he got paid. I don't think Green Bay was probably ever in the conversation once it got that high, but he was a heck of a free agent signing for him. He teams very well with TJ Hawkinson and gives them a lot of versatility at that tight end position. But those guys matter. And we saw how valuable even a Mercedes Lewis, even though wasn't much of a threat as a pass catcher, having that guy was super helpful. And they don't have that guy at tight end anymore. And I do think they're missing a little something there.
Yeah, no doubt. If we start talking about the other side, because I could belabor this point for days if you want, Andy. But
no,
you start talking about the defense, and the defense to me right now, you have some guys that are at the individual level play well. So in other words, you watch the play and Kenny Clark gets penetration, resets the line of scrimmage, and has a good play, makes the running back jump in the backfield. You have Rashawn Gary getting a sack. You have Preston Smith sitting the edge or boxing in on a puller. What you don't have is the second wave of people coming in, whether it's the backside pursuit, whether it's the safety coming in the box, or maybe right now for me, most importantly, and I know he leads the team in tackles, is Quay meeting people at the line of scrimmage, meeting people a yard deep in the line of, meeting people with a physical intent instead of catching, it's like we're being catcher's mitts right now. You catch 4 yards deep, 5 yards deep. You can have 50 you could have 150 tackles this year. If your average tackle position is 6 yards past the line of scrimmage at linebacker, that is not a good thing. And we talked about that all year last year being kind of like, where's the biggest area of opportunity for growth right now? It's attack the line of scrimmage. If you see the play, you have instincts. If you see it, hit it as hard as you can, blow it up. There's going to be a referendum on this weekend, by the way, because they run 21 personnel all the time. And if it's not Isaiah McDuffie, who we know will do that, if they focus that fullback on Quay's either going to have to A, meet that dude in the A gap on the line of scrimmage, or B, sit back there and catch him and watch Josh Jacobs run wild, because that's the name of the game when you get a fullback in the game against those linebackers.
And it's not just catching him too. You obviously see the times too where he tries to go around him like the opposite way, and then like the running back just cuts in and he's out of his gap now. And I mean, I'm now to the point where like you watch other teams around the league and you see a linebacker actually physically take on a block and shed it and go make a play, and you're like, that must be nice, because we unfortunately just don't see it. I think they do miss Devondre right now, but next guys have to step up. I wanted to ask you too, because this was like a red siren going off as soon as I heard it. And maybe again, it's just me spending too much time talking to you every week where like now these alarm bells are going off. But Matt LaFleur was asked about the run defense in one of his press conferences following last week's game. I think it was the Sunday after, whatever it was. And he said that he thought that everything could be fixed with scheme. He thought it was a scheme issue. And that was like a huge red flag that goes up to me because of all the stuff that we've been talking about. It's like, I'm sure there are some things from a scheme standpoint that Green Bay can do differently. However, at some point, the guys got to get off blocks. They have to go make a play. They have to play with a intentionality and a physicality. And I don't think that that's just scheme. And I thought Joe Barry actually did a better job when he was asked about it, where he said, yeah, right now it's a little bit of everything. It's kind of one guy, one play, another guy, next play. Sometimes it's the scheme. Sometimes it's the play. Like, I thought he was far more on point about that. But man, that red flag went right off as soon as Matt LaFleur said that.
Well, and if you think about Matt LaFleur's had a lot of success in the first couple of years as a Green Bay Packers head coach. So take this for what it is. He's a scheme coach. Yeah. I don't know I don't know how often he's got his hands dirty. Like, I don't know if he knows what really good quarterback footwork looks like before he met Aaron Rodgers. I just don't know. I don't know if he can teach a wide receiver coming in out of a break. I don't know if he can teach a left tackle how to pass set. I don't know these things. He's not known for that. He's known for being a scheme guy. And so when your answer reflects what you believe is important, and when the hard part as an ex-player is if you're a scheme guy, what you're saying is I'm more important than the player, right? Like my value is more important than the player because I can draw things on paper and all they have to do is learn how to do it. Like if I draw this up, it only works on paper thing, right? Yeah. The real value, it's like Elon Musk. Elon Musk is the smartest guy in the room. He's an engineer, but if he wants to know how to put a solar panel on a roof, he calls a roofer. He doesn't call an engineer. You need to be able to do both. You need to be able to teach the scheme. You need to put players in situations to be successful, and you need to give them the tools to find success. If you do that, you get buy-in, you produce winners. If you only do this one, you might look good, right? And you could start firing people who can't get the job done. But you're going to go through a lot of players until you learn how to draft and develop, which has been the Green Bay mantra for years and years.
Yeah, I will say to Matt's credit, some of my favorite moments are him is when he does get his hands dirty and does go up and like he'll coach a lot of individual players in practice and training camp and stuff like that. Now, I don't know if I'm assuming what he's saying is probably the right things and stuff like that, but still what you can tell, like, and we've talked about in the past, this is somebody that I think enjoys probably the scheme part of it a little bit more and probably leans on his assistant coaches and the positional coaches to do more of the dirty work, but he will definitely get his hands dirty from time to time. Like I said, it's actually some of my favorite Matt LaFleur moments, but again, at some point the rubber meets the road and you have to, actually go and see it out on the field. And so far I don't think we've seen that level of attention to detail and physicality.
And to follow that up, so obviously Matt made his bones in this league as an assistant coach and built his way up. So when I say it's a little bit probably not unfair that he could do that. I guess the way I would look at that is, if you look at their practice structure, how much time is dedicated to individual? And of that individual time, how much are they working on fundamentals versus like getting together and walking through plays or working on scheme? Like, how much time is actually put into development, the individual character or behaviors of these players? And that is, there's so many fingers that go out to that question, right? How much time is there? How good are the coaches that he's hiring at doing that specific thing? Does he have two coaches in the room, one that does that really well, one that does scheme really well? I mean, all of those questions kind of need to be answered, because as you see a lot of this stuff on tape, you can't fix the Quay Walker thing that we're talking. And Quay's going to be a good player in this league, and we're not bad-mouthing Quay, but you can't fix that with scheme.
Agreed.
You can't fix it. He's got to either learn how to do it right, or you're going to continue to get burned. And that goes for a number of players and a number of positions and a number of rooms in the Green Bay Packers organization right now.
Could not agree more. I know, obviously, anytime things go wrong, there always needs to be a scapegoat. There is always a public enemy number one. Right now, there's a few of those, Joe Barry being one of them, Royce Newman being another. I just want to ask about Royce Newman in particular. We're probably going to get a little bit more of musical chairs on the offensive line this week. Elton practiced for a second consecutive time. John Runyon Jr. did not practice for a second consecutive time. We don't know if that exactly means that Elton's in and Runyon's out, but let's just assume that's the case. And Elton's at left guard and Runyon's out this week. You've got a few options again. You could go with Royce at right guard. You could probably go Sean Ryan at right guard. You could probably put Zach Tom at right guard and put Yosh Nijman at right tackle. Is it time to do something other than Royce at this point, or how would you kind of go about putting the best five guys out there?
Yeah, that's a great question. And this week in particular, playing against the Raiders, and you think about the Raiders are actually better in nickel when they got their backups, Adam Butler and John Jenkinson. Those guys are actually better against the run. None of their guys are really that good against the pass, except for if you want to talk about Max Crosby, who might be the defensive player of the year. But the rest of those guys are just they're NFL players. But when you see kind of people resetting the line of scrimmage and making plays in the run game, it really kind of goes to their backup defensive linemen. So the reason I'm saying that is this would be a game to have a referendum on, is Royce's time up or not? Like, if you can't play well against these guys, you're essentially second team players, then it's probably time to move on. If you're saying before the game, like, what do you think? To be fair, I haven't seen Sean Ryan play enough to have an opinion on him. I remember what I thought about him in college. I don't know how much he's improved since then. I saw a handful of snaps in the preseason, but as you and I talked about, I'm not going to watch backup players in the preseason if I don't have to. Yosh Nijman is kind of the hard part for me, because with Yosh, he has experience, but he's not a good run player. And I think you're just feeding him to the wolves. You put him inside. And I don't want to move Zach Tom. He's playing, especially Max Crosby would absolutely murder a backup tackle in this league. Like, you cannot put that dude against a backup right tackle. So for me, if Elgin Jenkins is going to play left guard, is it Royce? Is it Sean Ryan? I think that's a coin flip thing, but I don't know you go any further than, I don't think you move Zach. I don't think you bring Yosh in. I'm guessing, Andy, that they're going to put Royce over there and just say, you're the one with experience. Let's see what we can do. And this is one of those deals where, when you lose Bakhtiari, you lose all these guys shuffling around. At some point, it's not a palms up deal by any means in the coaching room, but they're also going like,
what do you want us to do?
Yeah, what do you want us to do, man? We're not equipped for this level of injury history and all these kind of things. So I think they'd be obviously a lot better off, even if they had another. They don't really have one guy now where you go like, I feel good about him in every position. Like, you had that last, you had the exact time last year. Yeah. We felt at least you move around Jenkins, but now Jenkins has to be your guy. Like, he has to be the figurehead of the room, and you can't really be the figurehead of the room if you're moving around everywhere. It's just, it's too much.
Yeah. The Zach Tom thing is like a good news, bad news thing, because the great news is that he's playing pretty darn well at right tackle. The bad news is that, like, you don't want to move him off of that anymore, especially in a week where you face Max Crosby. And the two biggest things in this game are shutting down Max Crosby and Adams if he plays. So, like, all of a sudden putting Yash out there at right tackle and not putting Zach Tom out there on them, or on Crosby, that doesn't make the most sense in the world. So I'm with you. I think, Walker, Jenkins, Myers, and then Tom at right tackle. And then, like you said, flip a coin between Newman and Ryan. I'm more of the mind of like, let's just evaluate Sean Ryan at this point. Let's see what he's got. And if he doesn't have it, so be it. But I think at some point you just got to kind of try it. But if they want to go with Royce one more week, and like you said, have this be the referendum, if you can't win this week, it's probably just done, then so be it as well. But probably a coin flip.
Yeah, I'm with you.
I want to ask about as well. We're a quarter of the way into the season. There's a lot of hype, and I think understandably so, about this Packers rookie class. It's only 4 games, and not all of these guys have played 4 games, in their entirety. But it's been a up and down, I would say, 4 games for this rookie class. I think we've seen some really good things. I think Jaden Reed has shown some of his playmaking ability. We've seen little flashes from Luke Musgrave. Same thing with Lucas Van Ness. Dontavian Wicks, I think for a 5th-round pick, is acquitted himself nicely to what he's been asked to do so far. Anders Carlson's made every single one of his kicks. But what are your sort of overarching thoughts of this rookie class through 4 games so far?
Well, I think, unfortunately, there's 2 things I think are unfortunate for the Packers. One, when you have the 13th pick in the draft, which we don't really have very often, that guy, Lucas Van Ness, at some point in his career might be an impact player, but he's not an impact player right now.
Correct.
He's been hot and cold against tight ends. Let's just call it what it is. And he's got an unbelievable amount of athleticism, and I think he plays hard. I have nothing bad to say about him except for he's a rookie, and he's not like, this isn't Khalil Mack coming in his rookie year. It's just not.
Yep.
And maybe he'll be that way someday on tape when you do an evaluation in the film room pre-draft, and then they draft him 13. It was a head scratcher for me, but it is what it is. So he's the figurehead. He's the face of this draft. So you can have Carlson could be hitting his kicks. You can find what I think is a great pickup in Jaden Reed, and then knowing the backstory that he was an All-American and his quarterback. So that's all great. The tight ends are going to be a work in progress. I think when you draft those guys 2nd and 3rd round, you draft those guys knowing that they're going to play now, but they're not necessarily going to be effective now in a complete sense. The thing that's really unfortunate for this team is that the Detroit Lions just knocked it out of the damn park with their draft.
I know.
I mean, everybody was, they can't believe they drafted Gibbs. I can't believe they drafted Campbell. Sam Laporte. Those guys, Brian Branch, they are killing it. I mean, that rookie class is so much better than everybody else's rookie class in this division that it just makes, for me, it just makes everything look lackluster. I mean, we go play them last week, and you're saying the names of their top 4 guys over and over and over again. And so it makes it a little bit, it's tough. It's tough to look at this group with rose-colored glasses, but you do have a lot of guys that are getting in time. And if you really believe that this Jordan Love thing is the part of big, you kind of have to look at this not as we're trying to make a run for a Super Bowl and these guys aren't living up to what we need, and more as we're trying to make a run to the Super Bowl 3 years from now, and these guys are exactly where we need them to be.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think they're you see some positives, you see some flashes, but if you're looking for a big time impact player rookie year that you're just like, oh my goodness, this guy came in and was like a, close to a Pro Bowl, caliber player right away, or just even like, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying Micah Parsons or somebody like that.
Yeah, exactly. You're not
in the cards.
Yeah, not there right now. So we'll see what it eventually ends up with. We know that Green Bay gives these guys. I'm still very excited long term about Van Ness and Musgrave, Jaden Reed, some of these guys, but the impact we saw Laporte, like you mentioned, the Lions, like right, Laporte, that 3rd down play on that first drive where he's one-on-one with Rasul Douglas, and he's just like, hey, go run her out against Rasul, get open. He gets the big play. That's a big 3rd down. Green Bay's up 3-0. They got the pick on the opening drive. If Rasul sticks with him and knocks away that pass, or that like he can't get open, Green Bay gets the 3 and out there. They get the ball back up 3-0. Detroit's the better team. Let's not sugarcoat it, but like that might be an entirely different game from that point moving forward. That's a big play for Laporta, and we saw Brian Branch flying around the field, not just this week, but all 4 weeks so far.
What if Rudy Ford would have tried to knock the hell out of the quarterback on his way out of bounds? Did you see that?
I did not see that.
So Jared Goff,
wait. Was it the one where Goff took off running?
Jared Goff throws the pick. And Rudy Ford picks it off, and he has a direct line to knock the quarterback out with the ball in his hand. And he goes out of – I mean, that is one of the most unforgivable things I have seen all season. And I've said this yesterday to somebody. If the Green Bay Packers lose the next 13 games and you ask me where was like the canon event that ruined their season, that was it.
There were two Jared Goff plays in this game. Jared Goff blocked Kingsley Nigbare on the 40-yard reverse to Khalif Raymond too.
Yeah, but like he got, I mean, I get that. That's different than the Rudy Ford thing. The Rudy Ford thing is unforgivable. I've never seen it. I can't imagine. I'm just thinking, like, what would Bernardo Harris say to that safety coming off the sideline if he saw that? You know what I mean? What would Leroy Butler say to his counterpart if he's? I just can't imagine what would go that conversation in the film room the next day on the sidelines if anybody saw it. I mean, good Lord, that was terrible.
And it would have been like maybe one thing if it's like the final play of the game and like you're up by like 6 and you got to just make sure you secure the ball and get out of bounds. But like, yeah, you've got Jared Goff in front of you. You have him, you know, you can just run over that guy. And to not only like, and the crazy thing is like, he clearly, because he like pointed at him. Yeah. He's like pointing at him. Like, so you identified him. All right. We got that part down.
I'm
you
coming for you. Psych.
And then runs out of bounds. Oh, Mike, you have to laugh so you don't cry sometimes. All right, let's look ahead to Packers Raiders, where hopefully if they get any interceptions, they don't run away from Aiden O'Connell or Jimmy Garoppolo. We talked about, obviously, Devontae Adams, Max Crosby, the two stars in this game. They're two big-time players. You can't let those two guys beat you. Outside of that, what did you see on the tape so far from the Raiders?
Well, it's not a surprise. You're kind of looking at yourself in the mirror a little bit here. Like, they can't run the ball. I think they're 30th in the league. They average like 65 yards rushing a game or something like that. So it's terrible. They can't really stop the run. This team misses tackles left and right. I mean, the Chargers game they had like 600 pounds of tackler on the running back multiple times, and he just squirts out and gets another 20, 25 yards. Early in the game, late in the game, they had Justin Herbert dead to rights. He squirts out a tackle, gets a first down to ice the game. I mean, this is a team that is just – it looks like they have, especially on offense, the requisite amount of talent to be successful. Like the talent level at the skill positions with Jimmy Garoppolo in there, probably more than O'Connell, obviously, but Josh Jacobs in the backfield. You're thinking like this should be really good. Josh Jacobs is averaging like 2.7 yards per carry. Their offensive line looks at first glance like they can – hey, we stay square. We have good – they get pushed back all the time. They get bullied. Their left guard gets bullied from time to time. They're both tackles. You play this new game in Vegas. Like, you take a screenshot where their tackles are out like this with their legs spread wide, and you just bet whether or not the defensive end is going to get a sack or not because it was so bad last week. But I think offensively, if you can't stop the run against the Raiders, then you need to blow everything up and start over again. And then conversely, for the Green Bay Packers, when they're on offense, you look at this team, and if it's a big if you could figure out how to have Max Crosby not destroy this game, then there's not a single player on their team on defense there's good NFL players on their team. But there's not another player on their team where you're like, man, this is going to be a real problem. This matchup's going to really hurt. I just don't see that necessarily. So this is a game I feel like the Green Bay Packers should expect to win as long as Max Crosby or Devontae Adams doesn't have a signature game.
Totally agree. I think this is one that, and it's not like, Vegas has a big time home field advantage in Vegas. Like, there's going to be a ton of Packer fans at that game. Right. Wouldn't surprise me if there's more Packer fans at that game, honestly. Like, so I don't think that, plus Green Bay has more rest. They had the Thursday night game. Vegas was on the road in LA against the Chargers. It's a close game. It's a 3 p.m. game. So Green Bay should just be a little bit more rested here. I think they have the better team, but we talk about all the time of like, oh, what happens when you have this immovable object versus an unstoppable force? These two running games against each other is like the movable object versus the stoppable force. And it's going to be like, which one is going to give first? Because both of these teams are going to look at the other one and be like, this is a get right game for us. Yeah. And we need to figure out a way like to stop the run and run the ball. And the one that can actually do it, I think, is going to go a long way in figuring out a way to win this game.
When I was watching tape and kind of putting some notes together for this game, I just kept thinking, because the rest thing came up, and they have so much time, but what a great deal. They're all going to be healthy, and Jenkins is back, and Alexander might be back. And it came back to the same question, though. How are they practicing?
Yeah.
What are they – are you preparing to be successful this week in your actions on the field, in the practice field, in the classroom? And it's always been the question with this team. And it's still, I'll be really interested to see what happens, because they do have guys. I mean, Butler, Jenkins, Tillery, the guys up front in the defensive tackle position, they can beat you one-on-one. They can press the line of scrimmage in the run game. They can stop us from being successful if we don't use good technique. Max Crosby can stop the game. I mean, they do have guys. It's just from a secondary standpoint, Andy, these guys are dropping in safeties into the A gap. Sometimes you're going like, I don't even know if they know where they're supposed to be going. I mean, there's some crazy stuff on film. So this is a get right game for both teams. And I hope that the Packers are using this week, one, to identify their areas of opportunity at the individual level and the group level. And then two, really working hard to get right. You should feel so confident on Sunday morning when you step off that walkthrough field. You should feel like you have exhausted every angle to be in the best position to have a successful game. And if you feel that way, you're going to go in and feel super confident in this, because just on a talent basis, you look at these two rosters, you go, we should win this game 19 out of 20 times.
Hopefully that's the case. It must win for a team that's not expected to be a big time team in week 5, whatever it is. Sounds silly, but if this team does have any legitimate, hey, let's make a push at this thing, this feels like one they just have to win. Speaking of what, second straight week where Matt LaFleur will go against the coach that they interviewed during his coaching search. By the way, Dan Campbell was part of the coaching search when Green Bay hired Matt LaFleur. Josh McDaniels part of the coaching search when they hired Matt LaFleur. So
I didn't know that.
Interesting. Yeah.
What do you think about Josh McDaniels and the whole? I mean, the whole thing with Aiden O'Connell this week. He said something to the effect of, "Yeah, it's so interesting, isn't it? Because one thing I've learned from talking with a lot of coaches that are still in the league, is that they always think the second go right, you learn so much about what it takes to be a head coach and all the things you have to deal with outside of just doing your job. What you think your job is the first go around. That's why Bill Belichick, he had marginal success at Cleveland, right?
Yep.
He wasn't Bill Belichick when he was the Cleveland Browns head coach. Pete Carroll, the same thing when he was in New England. He wasn't the same guy. You learn so much. So that second time around, you seem to be so much better. And with the things that he said this weekend, I think he said prior to, Devontae Adams, Josh Jacobs coming out, and just the general feeling of everybody seems to be upset about something in Raiderland. It's a kind of a bizarre thing, because you would think that he had 2 trips, 2 bites at the apple working with Bill up in New England. So much success. You just wonder, gosh, I can't figure that out.
Yeah, some people just aren't meant to have that final ultimate say and be the guy, and some people are just better in that secondary sort of role. Maybe that's just Josh. One of the things that I said when Green Bay was looking at him as a head coach, I'm like, if they do decide to go with Josh Daniels and you've got 3-4 years left, maybe with Aaron Rodgers, I said, the thing that I feel confident with is that it's probably either going to be an A or an F. It's either going to work fantastically and you're going to get Rodgers and McDaniels working together and there's just a synergy and it's like McDaniels and Brady working together and it just looks awesome, or it's going to be probably a unmitigated nightmare and those two guys can't stand each other and it's just going to explode. I'm like, all right, at least it's an A or an F and you can move on right after one way or the other. True. But it's kind of been more of an F certainly for the Raiders so far than it's been an A, that's for sure. All right. All right. One last question. We'll get you out of here. So you have full reins of the Green Bay Packers for a day. You get to put your GM hat, coach hat, whatever hat you want to put on. You can make a change to the depth chart. You can move on from a coach. You can, maybe add a player, promote a player from the practice squad, anything you want to do. What's one change outside of obviously changing maybe some of the coaching habits? What's a change that you would make, if any, at this point for this 2-2 Green Bay Packers team?
Yeah, see, four games into the season, I just don't think the sample size is big enough to really dive in and say, what are we going to, are we going to, particularly at the personnel level, are we going to make a change? Is there anybody out there that's really going to help us that much? Nope. I think the answer is no. And again, resetting the framing of what you're looking at here. You've got first and second year guys in the wide receiver and tight end room. It is what it is. You got a first year quarterback. It is what it is. If I'm changing anything out, okay, I do have a change. I'd move Adam Sedemich back to the offensive line room. That's what I do. I don't know about. I don't know the staff enough to say if you fire Joe Barry, what does that look like next? Because I just don't know. But I do know what we get if Adam Stenavich is in the offensive line room from a production standpoint. And I just when I look at some of the players in that room, and it's probably not the fault of Buck. It's probably not his fault. It's probably what they're not doing, what they've forgotten about getting ready. What we were talking about earlier, but just because you associate that name Stenavich with really, really high level offensive line play, I might put him back there, even though he's going to be pissed off. But maybe you just he's an offensive coordinator / assistant offensive line or offensive line coach.
Yeah, I think that's a really smart move. And I don't think we've the sample size is small. B, I don't think we've seen this real Green Bay Packers team. So many guys have been hurt. There've been some sort of flukish, not totally, but it's the Bears in week 1. In week 2, you got 3 great quarters against that. Well, not great, but 3 solid quarters against Atlanta. And then one you couldn't do anything on offense or defense. The Saints game, you can't get anything going on offense. And then you explode for 18 points in the 4th. And then the Lions game, you're down 24-3 by your 13th offensive snap. And with the injuries and with just sort of the, lack of cohesiveness with everything and how these games have been played, I want to see a little bit more from everyone before I'm willing to rush to any super crazy judgments on this team.
There's another guy that I would talk about if you're talking about bringing in another coach, and it would cost a lot of money. But the defensive line coach for the San Francisco 49ers is a guy that I worked with in Miami. And Chris what was his name? Kocurek, Kocurek. Okay. Unbelievable coach. He's a disciple of old man Washburn, who was the Tennessee Titans, the New York Jets, the Detroit Lions with Sue. He was that line coach. And Washburn, and I don't know, he's not coaching anymore, he's retired. His son Jeremiah works for that, still works for the Eagles. But he was the best defensive line coach that I've ever been around. He might be the best position coach that I've ever seen.
Wow.
And Coach Chris, the defensive line coach for the 49ers, all those guys are super talented, but there's a reason they play at the level they do. It's the demand that this guy has. And I think if you really want a shot in the arm, because you got a talented room in that room that I think in some ways underperforms, if we're being honest, you bring a guy like that in. Coaching makes a huge difference at certain rooms, and offensive, defensive line. I don't think there are 2 rooms where coaching makes a bigger difference just because of the amount of players you have and the impact on the game than offensive, defensive line. You bring those 2 guys back, Stenavich back, go hire Chris from the Niners. Job done. I retire. I'll have a scotch by the end of the day.
There you go. Mike, I absolutely love it. These are a huge joy every single week. Tell everyone where we can find your work, your podcast, everything that you're doing, because you're doing incredible work.
Well, thank you. I'm you can find me Mike Wahle 68 on Twitter, Prostitute Perform on Instagram. The On My Block podcast is out. We put together probably 4 days of content on our Prostitute Perform channel on YouTube. So please check that out. Subscribe, rate, review. And I'm trying to do. I do a couple spots and this and that everywhere across the country during the week. So if you hear me, great. If not, that's fine too.
You still talk to Marcus Eversole every once in a while?
I do. Actually, I'll be on with him in about half hour.
Yeah, he's awesome.
Yeah, Marcus on Thursdays. Yeah, Marcus is he's a well of enthusiasm when it comes to Green Bay. He's the positive Packer person. You know what I mean? He does a great job of. Sometimes I'm like, man, you're being too positive right now. That was a really bad game. He's like, no, we're gonna be positive today.
I get to talk to him every Monday right after the games usually, and it's always fun talking to him. Good, bad, or ugly. We always are able to kind of go through some positives, but work through some of the other stuff as well. Mike, you're incredible. Everyone, make sure to go follow Mike at Mike Wahle 68. You can follow the podcast here at Pack-A-Day Podcast. You can follow me at Andy Herman NFL. That does it for us. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.